how do we feed billions of people around the world? And we're going to get into that with this next conversation. And it's all about aquaculture, but Matt Mulrennan is is leading the charge as one of our sponsors from XPrize Foundation. They've been super supportive, and Matt is here to give us an update on XPrize and all the other things that they're doing. So please give a warm welcome to Matt Mulrennan. Yeah, you want to use this?
Thanks.
Absolutely.
All right, hi guys. I'm going to be pretty brief because I really want to dig into the aquaculture panel, but I just wanted to mention a couple of updates from last year. How many of you guys were at the summit last year? Okay, great. I'm glad you guys returned this year. So we are trying to build this out, and reason we got involved from an XPrize perspective is that we try to bring people together to solve problems, and this is a great community of problem solvers in Southern California. And I'm really seeing the power of a lot of connections that happened here at the summit that were followed up on last year, and we have an update that I'm going to show you a quick video about. Something I mentioned to you last year about a corals prize that we're trying to launch still. And so we've actually done a bunch of work on that over the last year. But a couple updates from the panel that I hosted last year. We had a guy from Sea Status who developed a weather app. He actually just had an exit and sold to another company, and they merged. That just happened in the last couple weeks. And then just last week, we also had Nick from Save the Waves, if you remember him. He was also another one of the winners in this app challenge that we ran. And he actually, they did their own challenge that we supported to try and find the dirtiest beach around the world and crowdsource it to identify it and go clean it up. So they actually just got their winner. It's in Suva, Fiji. A pro surfer, a woman pro surfer there, actually identified that, and now they're going to be going there to try and clean up that break in the capital of Fiji. So pretty cool full circle update that some of those connections happened here at the summit last year, and XPrize Ocean Initiative, we're trying to support you guys. So if you guys have any ideas, please let me know. So for all of you guys who aren't familiar, XPrize, we are a nonprofit. We're here in Culver City. We do big prizes for innovation to solve grand challenges. Okay, we're best known for incentivizing the first private space flight, and now you guys know SpaceX and all these major private space industries. XPrize was the first private space flight, so it broke some barriers. It was not even legal to do private space before the first XPrize. The FAA did not allow you to just launch your own aircraft into orbit. Okay, so a lot of breakthroughs were made. A $10 million prize that was awarded in 2004 attracted $100 million into the private space industry. So now we've used that model, the prize model, the crowdsourcing model, to try and solve grand challenges in all sorts of different fields. We've done more ocean XPrizes than any other. And so we turned the space organization into oceans. And truly, as you guys all know, there are huge grand challenges facing the ocean. So we did one on oil spill cleanup. We did one on ocean health. It was about ocean pH sensors and ocean acidification. And that's what I came on to work on 5 years ago. Our current one is deep sea exploration and mapping the entire sea floor to a high resolution within our lifetime, hopefully. So we have some autonomous tools that we're going to be announcing that prize, a $7 million prize at late May. So stay tuned for that. And then what's the next Ocean X Prize is the cool thing that I get to think about a lot. And one of the grand challenges facing our ocean right now is the threat to coral reefs. Okay, you guys might know this. We are losing coral reefs at a dramatic rate. We could be some of the last generations to see coral reefs healthy in the environment, not in a picture. Okay, and by 2050 to 2100, we could lose 90%, up to 99% of coral reefs if we continue with the climate projections that we have right now. The newer climate report updated said we could lose 99%. And see, these are the rainforests of the sea. They're very important ecosystems for food security, for coastal protection, okay, and for jobs. And these are some of the poorest people on the planet that live in coral countries. Okay, this is part of what we call the rising billion. Okay, these people are struggling with the impacts of climate change now. So how are we going to bring these corals back at all? If we lose them, how can we restore this ecosystem? Totally unknown right now. Okay, on land we're restoring over 1 million hectares of trees a year. In the ocean we're always a little bit behind, and we've restored 37 hectares. This is about a football field size. 37 hectares of coral so far. So on land, we're restoring at a rapid rate. They have goals for 300 million hectares by 2030. We don't even have a goal in the ocean. But if we can do corals, we can do oysters, we can do kelp, we can do seagrass. And this is being proven as an emerging field in the ocean space. So we got into corals. And over the last year, we've been developing a huge prize, which could be the largest environmental prize in history if it's launched how I want it to be launched. And we're fundraising for it right now. So I want to roll this video about how we came to design out this prize. We did a crowdsourcing competition, actually get experts to design the prize with us. And they actually competed against totally different topics to see which one would come out and be the best topic that we want to launch. So let's go ahead and roll that video real quick. 500 million people around the world depend on coral reefs for food, security, livelihoods. We've lost half of coral reefs already. We're going to lose 90% or more by 2050 if we don't take action. That's why it's primed to launch Ocean XPrizes, because it really tackles those grand challenges facing the ocean.
I'm going to support coral survival, not because it's easy, but because it is the toughest one.
That's the spirit of the XPrize.
The challenge is huge, the goal is audacious, but saving coral reefs might just help save the world.
In this past week, I've become so desperately concerned about this prize. I really mean it. We don't have any time.
When you're supporting the Coral Reef Project, you're not supporting coral reefs, you're supporting all life.
Those are the lungs of the planet. We've got to have coral survival.
If we do not fund this prize, your grandchildren will never be able to find Nemo.
Every minute we waste is a minute we will never, ever get back.
The winning team will supercharge the natural process of reseeding reefs to grow as many corals as possible over a square kilometre and to get them to growing up to 2 years age.
The prize itself is awarded to teams that can plant 500,000 coral annually.
This is a model that can scale globally. What we need right now is to break through this outplanting bottleneck.
What are your thoughts here?
At the end of the day, all the models we do, everything that we do, it all comes back to how do we get it out onto the reef and surviving?
What's important is that all these technologies are tried, and we can't wait for any one of them any longer at all.
A big hit for both teams here, coral survival and coral restoration.
Congratulations to the teams. You guys put so much work in this. This is an amazing opportunity for corals. We're gonna work our butts off to do this. So now we are working our butts off to do this. So if you guys are interested and have any connections, we are looking for a sponsor to try and launch this prize. And we just had a major announcement this week from the government of Abu Dhabi to launch several more XPrizes. They're going to be giving XPrize over $80 million to launch a series of prizes. It's unclear if we're going to do something on corals, though. So we are looking for sponsors if you guys have any ideas. And the interesting part that this ties back into aquaculture is that they really took the principles of aquaculture and applied them to coral restoration. So one of the guys that you saw in there, Dr. David Vaughn, actually is an expert in this field. He was growing oysters and other things. And Philippe Cousteau went over to him and said, "Could you do that for corals?" He was like, "Yeah, I guess we could regrow some corals and plant them back out." And that's what they've been doing. So they've been scaling up and finding out really interesting ways to chop these corals apart and regrow the smaller ones at much more rapid rates. So there are some cool solutions in the coral restoration space that really do tie into aquaculture. So I'm going to bring up what I think is one of the most exciting panels at this whole summit to talk about the solutions in aquaculture. And three individuals that I've gotten to meet and actually see. The first federally permitted offshore aquaculture farm is right here. So that's what's really cool about this panel is we're talking about what's happening right here in our backyard, some of the most innovative work in this field. So can we roll some of the videos, and then I'm going to bring up, after you see your video called, just head up on stage. So I asked each one of them to show the coolest video that they have that details their project.
infrastructure that we're building. Right now, there's actually a debate in California of building more oil wells offshore, or if we should save that area for aquaculture. The obvious answer is aquaculture, regenerative aquaculture. So that's hence why we showed the oil rig and get rid of it. We're building a kelp farm offshore with the Catalina Sea Ranch. This is a part of our Department of Energy grant, where we will be basically designing and developing and implementing the first ever offshore seaweed farm in America. What we're doing is not crazy. You can see seaweed farms from space in China. We just need to bring that industry over to America. What we're growing is giant kelp, which is the fastest growing organism on the planet. The reason why the Department of Energy is having us figure out the best cultivation methods is because, well, if it requires no fresh water, it cleans the oceans, requires no fertilizers, no land, then why should this not be the future of biofuels? This is just kind of our designed rigs. In the past, the Navy tried in the 1970s to deploy a system similar to this, and it blew away in a storm. But we're working with the leading scientists, researchers, entrepreneurs from around the world. Our team consists of members from Norway, from Faroe Islands, from Chile. We are so lucky to be on their team, helping them design and implement this. And what we're doing is trying to unlock the oceans. Offshore is the future of farming. It's the future of food production. And we're just kind of showcasing what the possibilities hold. We'll get into what we're going to use it for.
Thank you so much, Brian. So this is Brian Schmidt from, this is wrong, so Scotty is his brother.
I'm the little bro.
They have the company together, and I've gotten to know them quite well through this process. They've invited me out to see the farm, Catalina Sea Ranch, and their plans for the future. At Primary Ocean Producers is the company, Macro Systems. So next video.
It's actually swimming like a fish is pretty cool.
So Liane, welcome from Aquaai. Do you want to mention anything about that video?
Sure. Hi, Liana is my name, and Simeon Piotrkowski in the back there is my co-founder and partner at Aquaai. So everybody always says, why a fish? Why not just another platform, another box, another torpedo shape? And our answer is simple. Mother Nature got it right. So what we're able to actually do and why it is a fish is we're able to gather the data more efficiently, power-wise, and also we're able to get up right close to the natural habitat without disturbing the natural habitat. So our solution for, in this case, farmers, is that they're able to get the data so that they're making the decisions that are smarter for the environment as well as for the stock, and so that you, the consumer, in this case, one of our farms that we're swimming at supplies whole foods as the salmon, and I can assure you that that salmon is very fresh and very healthy. So you're not eating, there's a stigma around farmed fish, right? So you're eating very healthy salmon in this case. So fish as a service is what we do, and we help the farmers.
It's also a Nemo, right? It's like a Nemo shape.
Yeah.
Super cool.
Everybody loves the Nemo.
Hold this up.
Yeah, so this video is
picture from the front page of the Washington Post in fall of 2018. And it was going into the potential of offshore aquaculture for feeding America. Catalina Sea Ranch is the first offshore aquaculture facility in U.S. federal waters. It's still the only offshore aquaculture facility. Our cash crop is mussels, and we are working on other native sustainable species as well that are in the R&D stage in the water as well. But mussels are a cash crop, and we're selling to the Southern California market right now. And our carrying capacity at the ranch is 2 million pounds.
Wow.
Awesome.
And we get advertisement, of course. This is just the life we live right now. We can't avoid advertisements anyway.
Mussels do improve your heart health. Long chain omega-3s. Eat more mussels, everybody.
A mussel farm off the coast of California could be the future of the world's food supply. This is Catalina Sea Ranch, the first commercially viable aquaculture operation in U.S. federal waters. The mussels are grown on suspended ropes in 100 acres of open waters, which the Sea Ranch says gives them the capacity to supply 1,500 pounds of fresh mussels a day. As the world's population grows and the depletion of land increases due to terrestrial farming and ranching, sea farms could be the key to feeding the planet in the coming future.
Now we get down to the business of farming. Does anybody want to talk about farms and farming?
They also represent a rare patch of common ground between the Trump administration and the environmental community. The White House wants to reduce a $15 billion annual seafood trade deficit with nations such as China, Japan, and South Korea. While some environmentalists think this could be a substitute for terrestrial farming. But getting permits can be often difficult. California has not issued any for sea farming in state waters, pending environmental reviews. But some sea farmers don't want to lose time and are developing programs to raise shrimp, scallops, and finfish in federal waters. So far, Catalina Sea Ranch has plans to expand 30 times its current size.
Welcome. So Catalina Sea Ranch and Lindsay, thank you guys. Thanks to the AV team. Thank you guys. You guys don't get enough credit. That was great. We always say at XPrize, you can do AI and not AV. So you guys crushed it. So we saw the projects, and we're talking about aquaculture today. For everybody who's not familiar, aquaculture is the farming of seafood or plants for either human consumption or other products. And so we're going to talk about why that is needed at a macro level to feed the world. That's what's being acknowledged. We have a growing population. We are looking offshore. This is a field that exists around the world. China is a global leader in this. Asia is really crushing the United States on this. The United States is really brand new to the field of aquaculture. But we are going to have to increase food production 60% by 2050, and so people are looking to this field. So today we're not talking about, we're talking about some of the most sustainable food on the planet, really, with mussels, which new studies are coming out that says this is one of the most sustainable meats that exists, right? And they're even arguing vegans should eat this because it might be the best food for the planet at large, because it involves very low energy input, no fresh water, really no space. And if you go out to the farm, you can't even see it out there until you're right on top of it. So it's taking up, it's a very low impact on the environment. It's actually filtering water. It's doing a lot of benefits for the environment. So today we're talking about the least controversial kinds of aquaculture, and that's kind of what I wanted to dig into a little bit today. But what I love about this panel is none of you guys come from the ocean space, right? So really, you guys are not marine scientists, and you're solving ocean problems. That's what I kind of like about this crowd in general. So Liane, you have a really interesting background, totally not related to aquaculture or the fish. So can you give us your story, how you came to be, how you came to create this awesome
Okay, well, I have to blame my partner, who is the mind behind the machine. I met him. I was a journalist in a previous career life. This is my second career. I was in Israel doing a story on the Q of Israel. James Bond Q, you know, the guy who made all the cool gadgets and stuff. That's my guy. And so I met him, and he was obsessing about his need to create a robotic fish. That stemmed from a promise that he had made his daughter. When she would work with him in the lab, he'd already built some 2-meter tall robots in his past to study HRI, human robotic interaction. And she came home from school one day after learning about the chaos, the crisis in the ocean, and said, "Pops, you know, you have to stop with the land-based systems, make a robotic system." And he studied and understood, because of climate change and superstorms, that really the system had to be biomimetic. It had to be able to integrate and withstand rough seas, but also be made of fewer parts, but most importantly, be affordable to really create an impact. The idea wasn't just to build another $100,000, you know, mapping drone or box that you can play with and drive, but it was really to build a system that could be used across many different industries to create the impact that we really need to preserve our ocean. So hence the robotic fish, and we ended up in aquaculture because you know, robot fish to monitor live fish is actually a really good story, and from a journalist, you're always looking for the good story, right? And so we were very fortunate. I saw a documentary, A Fish on Your Plate, on Frontline, and I contacted the company that was featured as one of the most sustainable companies in the world in northern Norway. Showed them a 30-second clip, and I said, "This is what we do," and they fell over and they said, "Come." So we did, and we were fortunate, had successful trials. And now, right now, at this moment, we have fish in the Arctic Circle, on the Arctic Circle, monitoring those, what you saw, autonomously. And, you know, we're able to they run missions, they're an early warning system. And so the goal, again, as I mentioned before, was to help the farmers do their job. They don't want to cut corners, but as you pointed out, rightly so, the population is booming and everyone wants seafood, and we have to be sustainable in our approach to feeding the planet.
And would you like to share the news that just happened recently with an update on some investment opportunities for you? If you'd like to share it, like just for all the aspiring entrepreneurs in the audience, would you like to share that?
So if you're an aspiring entrepreneur here, just keep at it. You know, just trust your gut. My whole thing is, and don't sell yourself short. Because if you're doing something to improve our oceans, you're on the right track. And if you're doing something to feed our planet, you're on your right track. And just put your blinders on and don't listen to all the naysayers. For 4 years in, we've done an incredible job to get as far as we have on very limited funds, most of it friends and family, a few VCs. And then we just launched a round, and we have Boost VC, Adam Draper is leading that for us. So we've been really fortunate to have him on board. We also have Arlen Hamilton from Backstage Capital, who's on our, and GrowthX, Will Schmidt. Actually, Will Bunker joined us ages ago when we were very early, because he was coming from a catfish farming family. So he got it right away, way back when we just started. So we've been fortunate to be able to grow, and mostly, and most importantly, also our customers who are leaders in the industry have also invested in us, because they see and they know I don't have to sell them. They get it. So there's nothing, I mean, I think, you know, just to speak to what you know, when you're trying to solve a problem and you go to your customer, and if your customer says, "Oh, I know this industry, I know this potential, I want in," you know you're on the right track.
Thank you. Brian, you told me your story at Summit where we met, and I was like, instantly, I was like, I'm gonna be friends with this guy. I gotta help out as much as I can with the seaweed and the kelp farming. Could you tell us, like, how'd you end up?
Yeah,
how'd you end up on the stage?
It's a bit ridiculous. You know, seaweed saved me. 2.5 years ago, I was producing major music festivals. I was traveling with some world famous DJs, and I realized that life wasn't sustainable. So I decided, let's get into sustainability. Went on a little soul-searching expedition to Myanmar, and I joined a Buddhist monastery in the poorest country in Southeast Asia. And I was sleeping on a wood plank, eating 1 meal a day. And they gave us an algae pill, which was spirulina, which is a microalgae, not to get confused with macroalgae, which is the seaweed, the plant-like. Microalgae's, you know, a single cell. But that led me towards thinking about algae, and my meditations just kept leading towards algae. I come back to the States, this is 2 years ago, and my brother, who would be up on stage, he says, "Man, you look good. how was your trip? I go, man, seaweed's my purpose. And he's just like, little bro, he's like, well, shit, I don't know my purpose, let's do it. And my other partner out there, Brandon, he's a basically honey badger when it comes to research. And we just went on the books and basically went fast forward. I mean, so we studied harder than, I didn't study in college, so I studied harder than anything I've ever done in my life. And that led us to meeting and interviewing Phil Cruver, because we were trying to identify our entrance into the market. And Phil Cruver, who's a champion, the only person that has a federal permit to do aquaculture, he offered us a deal structure to where we invest in them and we get the algae rights on the farm. So we are basically developing with the ARPA-E, Department of Energy. Now we have a grant, and we're developing designing and implementing the first offshore seaweed cultivation system in the United States of America, thanks to Phil, my partner, Scotty, and I guess the Buddhist monastery.
Such good. The power of meditation.
Yeah, meditate.
So important.
Yeah.
Such an excellent story. And you guys are applying for a second round for ARPA-E as well, right?
That's correct. That is due April 3rd, so that's why Scotty's head's down at the desk right now. And if we win phase 2 with the Catalina Sea Ranch, it'll be for about $4 million to deploy the system we've been designing and building over the last year with our just expert team from around the world. We consider ourselves system integrators. We're not the scientists. We're not the seaweed farmers. We just try to help bring everything together. Why recreate the wheel when the wheel's been made around the world? Just bring it here, combine it, and implement it.
Thanks, man.
Yeah.
Lindsay, how'd you get on the stage?
Brian was mentioning Phil Cruver. That's my father. He's the CEO of Catalina Sea Ranch. I joined the company about 2 years ago. I have a bachelor's in biology, and I had some experience that was necessary to help put together a biotoxin lab, which was a project that Catalina Sea Ranch was working on 2 years ago. So that's when I joined the company. My father he got the permits for the first offshore aquaculture facility in 2012. And then it's taken us to 2019, and now we're selling mussels to the public.
Awesome. That's great. And so you guys just did the first harvest within the last 6 months or so, right?
Right. In July of 2018, we had our first harvest, and we had our fair share of delays due to regulatory issues. And that's just what happens when you're the first ones in federal waters. A lot of regulatory hurdles. So took us a while, but we finally got there. And we've been selling for at least 6 months now.
So let's talk about the regulatory hurdles here, because most of us think of ocean regulations as a really good thing, right? We think of it's great, we want to plan for certain things and try to, improve our spatial management and otherwise. But it's taken a long time to just grow mussels offshore here, and it's cost a lot of money, and it's been, I think, a really big journey for Phil and your whole team. The first person through the door gets shot, is often the expression in these fields, and we saw that with space, we've seen that with other fields. Can you speak to that? What the struggles with permitting here have been, because you guys are the first in California and in offshore waters.
Yeah, we've had a lot of issues with permitting, regulations. The authorities are just trying to be extra cautious, but the biggest problem that we've had has been related to biotoxins, which is testing our products so that they can make sure that they're safe to sell to the public. And our authorities being in federal waters are totally different than state waters, and the rules that we have to follow are totally different. So we've had to do 40 times the amount of testing as a farm inshore, which doesn't really make a whole lot of sense scientifically, but that's the game that we're having to play. So it's very expensive, and we're trying to collect the data to prove that there's no reason to require extra regulations. as opposed to state farms.
And can I add on that, what they're doing and what we're doing with deep offshore aquaculture, it is the future of aquaculture, because what we're getting rid of is the visual blight from on land and also human runoff, human pollution. It really affects the oysters, the oysters or the mussels or the seaweed, because they're kind of biofilters, they're bioremediators. So when we go further offshore, we're eliminating all that pollutants from human runoff, and we're starting to create a much healthier seafood. And that's why it is the future, and it's just ridiculous, these hurdles that Catalina Sea Ranch has had to go through in order to basically test a healthier mussel to get to the market.
Yeah, there's mussels growing everywhere, all over California. You look at any pier, you can find mussels, and it's a really similar thing. So if you go out to the ranch, I recommend anybody to jump on board. Out of AltaSea, try to get on a tour on Captain Jack, and do a tour of these facilities. But thank you guys so much for answering my questions.
So just touching upon the regulatory issues. So in Norway, they're very stringent, and the farmers have to report daily at 3 meters and 6 meters the water quality. So one of the things that we're doing is actually taking that chore away from the farmer and directly giving that information either to the farmer that they can then ultimately get to the regulatory agencies, regional and federal. And I suspect that moving forward, as more farming happens, you're always going to have these agencies that need to check the water quality. And I think the more, if we look at Norway and what they have put there and approach it in that manner, where we're already being proactive in regulating ourselves, then chances are that we won't have the necessity to have uber regulation from a federal level.
And I think it's creating this kind of gold standard that actually, well, for the first movers in the space, is that it's going to be tough to get competition really in this space because of how much work they've had to do to get this gold standard certification.
Yeah, there's on the Catalina Sea Ranch, there's actually a buoy out there right now. You can log on to
nomad.catalinasearanch.com.
And you can check, basically if there's a shark nearby or
doing some really interesting science so there's a lot of people that are really interested in this farm and just putting as many sensors as they can on the space to understand it, understand how the mussels are growing, understand how the kelp is growing, so it's really interesting science that's going to happen.
So important to create the gold standard, as the industry leaders. I mean, because this could run off in a very bad way. Fish farming by itself is not sustainable, but that's why we need to add IMTA, which is integrated multi-trophic aquaculture. You add other species around it, specifically macroalgae, and it helps bioremediate the pollution from the fish, and it actually makes the algae grow faster. So it's a symbiotic relationship, and that's kind of what we're creating out there, because mussels, even though they're biofilters and they're great, they still release nitrates and phosphates, which then the seaweed, which we're putting right next to the farm, is going to be cleaning that up, deacidifying the ocean, taking in carbon and releasing oxygen to make even a healthier mussel. So it's, we got to co-locate species.
So it creates a lot of wins, is what you're trying to say. Yeah. It helps, it takes up nutrients that are, the runoff pollution, and otherwise it actually can help remediate climate change if we do it at scale. And you're replacing some more unsustainable sources, like for fertilizer. You can create fertilizer out of the kelp and put it and use less of this chemical fertilizer, which is creating the dead zones. So some of the biofuels and what you're trying to do with
that's the idea with this kelp is we're taking in carbon and nitrogen from the ocean, and our first product that we're creating is a biostimulant, is the technical term, but it's basically an organic seaweed fertilizer, which is being used all over the market right now. It's a booming industry. People are trying to get away from synthetic fertilizers, stop dumping nitrate, which is going into our oceans, which is then acidifying the oceans, creating the dead zones. So that's what we're doing with the kelp. That's our first product. We're essentially juicing it, and it creates, it's high pressure homogenization, and it creates this amazing product that you use less water, and it makes the plants grow about 20 to 30% times faster, bigger. It's crazy. It's like a godsend.
So my last question for each of you, and then I want to turn it over to you guys. I'm sure you guys have some really great questions. Is where do you guys see yourselves in 5 to 10 years, what's like the moonshot for your company? What do you see yourself? What kind of stage would you like to be on in 10 years? What would you like to be doing? Lindsay, you want to go first?
Okay, so right now, Catalina Sea Ranch is at 100 acres, and we are in the process of applying for 3,000 acres, expanding on the San Pedro Shelf right out here. And so we're going to have 3,000 acres, and we see the San Pedro Shelf as being prime real estate for aquaculture in America, really. It's great because this is one of the largest underwater plateaus on the West Coast, is right out here. Very mild weather, we don't get hurricanes, and there's some upwelling that's coming. So the San Pedro Shelf is all 150 feet deep, and then it drops off. So there's a lot of upwelling that brings nutrients up, and that supplies our products. So it's perfect for aquaculture, this area, and so much so that we have trademarked the term Aquaculture Capital of America because we believe in the potential of the San Pedro Shelf for aquaculture. So that's where we see it going in about 10 or 15 years.
Wow, that's a huge opportunity for San Pedro and for this area. And I've kind of when I've gone out to see the facility, I've really wanted a dive company to just do like a dive, at your site, because that would be really neat. So if anyone wants to start a company to do dive operations out of AltaSea, I'll start that company with you.
It's a great dive, and we've seen that our mussel farm is creating habitat for fish. So when you go out there on the weekends, there's all these fishing boats right on top of the ranch. They don't know what it is, they just know that that's where the fish are. So we have a bunch of yellowfish tuna coming in all the time, and it's a great dive spot.
Thank you. Brian, where are you at in 10 years?
Okay, so right now corn is farmed in 90 million acres in America. 30 million acres is used solely for biofuel. We can produce the same amount of biofuel as at 30 million acres in 1 million acres. And basically we're reducing water usage, we're freeing up land for more high valuable crops, we're quitting dumping fertilizers, we're actually bioremediating the ocean. So ideally in 10 years we have about 1 million acres, and we're just a little ambitious, but ARPA-E wants us to think that way, or Department of Energy wants us to think that way. But I think we're going to be producing many valuable organic byproducts, because our first product is the biostimulant, because you still get left over all the fibers and the proteins. So we're creating a macro cascade, which is able to extract multiple valuable compounds from one feedstock, which is basically what happened in the oil industry, where you can extract things before what's left over is energy. And we want to get into basically fucoidins, polysaccharides, which is in the pharmaceuticals. And one of our biggest plays, we've worked with and kind of been talking with Lolly Straw, who's creating the bioplastic straw, and they need alginates, specifically alginates from seaweed, and our seaweed's super high in that type of alginate. We're working on an extraction process at lab scale right now. So just commercials, so basically commercializing all these valuable products, which we have at lab scale, but grow a lot of seaweed and turn it into valuable organic byproducts.
Very cool. Very cool. Lots of different opportunities with kelp and with seaweed. A lot of the products you guys consume have come from this, including toothpaste and
ice cream,
alginates, and so if you haven't tried kelp, just go out. You guys can just get a new frond, go eat some off the coast here. Pretty good. It tastes pretty good too. So a lot of opportunities with eating it as well. Liane, where are you at in 10 years?
10 years?
I don't know, 5, 10.
Wow. I see, well, for Aquaai, clearly we're mostly right now in Norway, in salmon farms. We've been having some conversations with Campacci farms globally, seaweed farms and kelp and the such. I see also, because we are an underwater drone and because, we're all about saving the seas, as Emily asked us to do. We see other industries as well. Coral reef restoration, everyone knows, especially if you're a nonprofit, how costly it is sometimes to send crews out and how advantageous it would be to be able to drop in, one of our fish there and get that information and that data back to your screen without the worry of sending a dive crew. Right now, as you saw in the video, the fish is connected to a cable because the farmers wanted it that way because they're getting a 24/7 feed. Our units do not have to swim with that tether. They can float out in the open as well, giving the information through its own kind of tag-along buoy system, if you will. So I see us in other industries besides aquaculture, coral reef restoration. I think coastal flooding is also is apparently becoming more and more obvious that we need to have different measures. Reinsurers have come to us and said, they lose people sometimes when they have to send them out to get after a coastal flooding situation, the water is stagnant and there's bacteria and disease and it's very toxic, and they could use the units in those scenarios as well. So for us, it's really multiple industries 10 years out. But as a young company, you're always putting your blinders on and you have your targets and your milestones to hit. So for us right now, it's all focused in aquaculture and growing in aquaculture and then rolling out in the other industries in the future.
Awesome, thanks. So we got about 5 minutes left. Over to you guys. Anne.
So I just wanted to thank the panel.
Cool, thank you. Any other questions for the panel about aquaculture? Sean, in the back.
I came in late on this. Is there a way for us to still eat a little bit of fish and not ruin our oceans?
It can't be farmed, or it has to be farmed. It cannot be wild fish. We hit peak fish 20 years ago, and we've seen what's happened just in San Pedro with the collapse of the tuna industry, which is why all these warehouses have been empty for the last 50 years. So we can't keep pulling wild fish out of the ocean. We have to do farmed alternatives.
Can't be pirates, can't be pillagers. It's time for us to farm, just like what happened on land. We killed the woolly mammoths. We're like, oh crap, we better start to, farm these cows. We don't just take the cows, which that's a terrible industry. And with seaweed, we can end cow farts too, by the way, which is 25% of greenhouse gas emissions, methane, anyways.
Sustainable farming. Let the wild replenish itself and farm smartly. We made a lot of mistakes farming on land. Let's not make those same mistakes farming in the ocean.
Correct. And some original mistakes in aquaculture around the world.
Absolutely.
There's, when you say aquaculture, people do get this
they go,
they're like, shrimp farms, and
I only buy wild caught.
Some countries we get 9% of our seafood imported. I think somebody mentioned this earlier, and you usually get it from a not so great source right now. It's Wild Wild West, like you're saying, in terms of regulation of seafood. But this seafood is really, especially mussels, I think is one of the most sustainable foods on the planet. I just want to defend this in terms of just making a food. I mean, it's barely even a meat. It's like a weed. And really, they're arguing vegans should eat this because it's more sustainable than soy. It's more sustainable than anything you can grow on land. So it's just... I don't want to oversell mussels too much, but
people don't
we don't eat enough of them.
They're so healthy for you.
We're not eating enough mussels in the United States.
Yeah.
So, anyway.
Hey, Brian, just follow up on the cow farts thing and what the seaweed products can do, especially here like in Central California.
Right.
And how much pollution we get from that, and people don't even realize that.
Yeah, I mean, cow burping and cow farting is 25% of greenhouse gas emissions right now, and methane is 80 times more potent than carbon dioxide. And they discovered about 2.5 years ago, this was actually why we got into the industry, because we're like, okay, it's our duty to scale the growth of this type of seaweed and just start working with farmers and feeding it to them. Unfortunately, there's tons of, Nature Conservancy, there's a lot of groups, Stanford, are working on the cultivation method of this it's called Asparagopsis taxiformis. We haven't completed the life cycle and the ability to really scale it, but many people are working on it, and once that happens, then we're going to be going after that down in Mexico, trying to scale the growth. We've been working with Mexican relations too, because California is so tough to get any permitting by, so we're like, oh, let's go to Mexico. More Wild Wild West. So.
And everyone gets that right, that it's how cows process their food, you know, and they're being fed things like grain that is actually really bad for them, that's causing all this, them to burp.
Yeah, the studies show that if you do feed this, it's only at 1% of their diet, so it's about half a pound a day. It eliminates 99% of all methane emissions from the cow. And what that does is it keeps the energy in the cow, so the cows are actually growing faster, producing more milk, and it's healthier. And they're doing all these studies at UC Davis in Australia and Stanford, and so it's proven that it actually makes a healthier cow, and you save a lot of energy. So, you know, hopefully we'll be able to scale the growth of that type of seaweed in, you know, the next couple years or decades.
Hi, I really admire the innovation that this is just an explorative question. If we could get people to shift their behaviors, the behavior that we're looking for is eat lower on the food chain, low trophic aquaculture. That's what shellfish aquaculture is. It's low on the food chain, so it's sustainable. It's the most sustainable animal protein on Earth. So switching, for example, a burger or even a fish or a tuna, alternatively, you can eat a plate of mussels or oysters or scallops. That's much better for the planet. And seaweed.
Yeah, and I'm just going to argue, you know, for climate-related impacts, you know, it's just so good. It's just like, it's right here. It's not using energy to create. And so I think you got to think through those alternatives and what the market is right now. Unfortunately, people are eating more seafood than ever before because of the health benefits that they're seeing in these studies. And so people like Sylvia Earle and others argue you shouldn't eat fish at all, right? And no seafood at all. And I'm actually of the different opinion on that, that we should be eating more mussels than you should be eating some other things. So you have to be specific. I think it's just not like a catch-all. Like, so, yeah, it's a good exploratory question, but it's can you change behavior at large? You know, I think people are trying, but.
Where's that conversation?
Yeah, we're the guinea pigs. There's people poised, ready to come in, buy in. You know, DuPont is a big investor into seaweed farms for chemicals. I think that's what we're building, the infrastructure. We're the guinea pigs, and the big guys are going to try to come in. Hopefully, we can stand up ourselves and tell them no, but you know,
hold them off.
Hold them off for a minute.
Reinsurers.
But yeah, there's tons of big money interests that everyone knows this is. I mean, aquaculture surpassed agriculture about 4 years ago in the world economy. It's now at like 250 billion. Agriculture sitting at like 200 billion, and it's just exponentially rising. That's where it's happening.
I think this is going to be our last question, Mike. Is that right? Okay.
So Catalina Sea Ranch is 6 miles from the coast of Huntington Beach. So at that distance, we're really not experiencing any of the near-shore pollution that you might find in some of the state farms. So we're quite a distance out.
Ocean's a huge place. Pollution dissipates really quickly. That's why what they're doing and what we're doing going offshore is the cleanest and healthiest seafood, because we don't have to deal with all the pollutant runoff because it literally dissipates before it gets 6 miles out there.
We're operating also 6 to 8 miles off. We're all in marine. We're not, in some large tanks and stuff. And we're also monitoring the feed waste. So one of the key issues in aquaculture is, ratio in and versus out, at least with finfish. And so we're making certain that the reduction of feed occurs. And with that, to answer your question, so big players like Cargill are also looking more into AI, data sources, because as feed decreases, clearly they want to still have a value add through their existing customer base. So they're trying to get more into the technological AI game to offer that to their existing customer base. So,
and sardines and anchovies, not very sustainable. It's a depleting stock. Actually, we stopped all catching of sardines in California. Unfortunately, Mexico didn't follow suit, even though we put major pressure on them, so they're still grabbing all the sardines. That's a really unfortunate thing. You can't farm those. No. Not that I know of, actually. Excuse me if I'm speaking out of.
Yeah, it's a big lag time between domesticating a new species.
That's correct.
is what I'm
Yeah.
hearing. So some of the species we haven't done yet.
People are working real hard on tuna, but there's no way to close that life cycle yet. Tuna needs, because we all love tuna. It's one of our favorite fish, but we're just wild catching it. And that's all you can eat is wild caught tuna. So.
Oh, can we thank our panelists here?
What another exciting panel. I mean, how do you feed 1 billion people? And I'm really excited about that. I think a couple things that come to mind, Katie is here from Patty, and I don't know if you caught that at the beginning, but dive site, right? I'm in the middle of getting certified thanks to Patty, but I think that might be my first dive site that I go to, so that could be fun. And, the other thing Matt and I were talking about is next year is, out here on the grass, we're thinking about having some sort of like from ocean to table type of dinner and, maybe pulling in some of the aquaculture folks and grabbing some of the food that they're growing out there and bringing in chefs and, incorporating ocean-friendly restaurants as well into everything. So that's something we can look forward to next year.